Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking arguably the most disruptive tactic in modern football history. We're talking about a concept that didn't just win a few games. It completely ripped up the coaching manual and permanently altered how we understand attacking play. We are, of course, talking about the false nine. To truly grasp the massive impact of this tactical revolution, we actually need to go back to a very specific night, May 2nd, 2009. It's El Clasico, one of the fiercest rivalries in all of sports, and it's taking place right in the heart of enemy territory for Barcelona, the Santiago Bernabéu. Just 9 minutes into the match, Barcelona's manager, Pep Guardiola, signals an audible from the touchline. Now, this was a pre-planned, entirely unexpected move. He instructs Lionel Messi to leave his usual wide position and swap places with the traditional center forward, Samuel Eto'o. The result of that single positional swap? A historic, earth-shattering 6-2 victory for Barcelona. Real Madrid's traditional defensive structure, which was built entirely to mark standard, static strikers, had absolutely no answer for this radical new setup. It literally left some of the highest-paid center backs in the world grasping at shadows for 80 minutes, utterly dismantled on their home turf.
Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly did a seemingly simple positional tweak result in total, humiliating domination over one of the greatest clubs in the world? What was the mechanical secret behind Barcelona's absolute control of the pitch that night? A secret they would, by the way, ride for years to come.
All right, Section 1. False nine versus the traditional striker. Let's contrast this secret weapon directly with the rigid, old guard methods of the traditional striker.
So, the false nine is, at its core, a total deception. It's a forward who, rather than staying high up the pitch to wrestle with big center backs, drops deep into the midfield area, often right near the halfway line. Before this became mainstream, possession-dominant teams were running into a major tactical problem. They desperately needed more central control, but traditional strikers left these glaring gaps in the midfield, which then led to wingers getting completely isolated out wide. The false nine brilliantly blurs the line between a traditional striker and a playmaker, solving both of those problems at the exact same time. And this brilliantly illustrates just how vastly different the two roles are across the pitch. Look at the positioning. While a traditional number 9 stays super high, the false nine drops down into the midfield. The traditional striker waits in the box to receive the ball, right? But the false nine receives it deep, operating right between the opponent's defensive and midfield lines. Even defending is totally different. The traditional 9 has pretty limited defensive duties, whereas a modern false 9 is actively involved in pressing. So instead of a fixed, high-up poacher, you have this incredibly dynamic, roaming presence who drags defenders totally out of position to create massive amounts of space. This stark contrast right here is exactly why the false 9 was so revolutionary. Possession teams realized, hey, we need a playmaker and a finisher, but we obviously can't afford to sacrifice an extra player on the pitch just to have both. The false nine combine these two very distinct jobs into a single, highly dynamic role. They dictate the play from deep, but they are still entirely responsible for the final penetrating action. Section 2. The domino effect. How the system works. Let's look at how this actually plays out on the grass.
We can essentially view this tactical chain reaction as a falling line of dominoes. First, the false nine drops deep into the half space. Second, this instantly creates a 2-on-1 numerical overload in the midfield. And step 3 is where the real magic happens. The opposing center back is suddenly faced with an impossible choice. If they follow the false nine deep into the midfield, well, they leave a massive hole in the defense. But if they stay high in their defensive line, the false nine has all the time and space in the world to pick out a killer pass. It's a classic damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. Step 4 then completes the trap. As the false nine drops, the wide wingers instantly cut inside into the vacated space behind the defense. So regardless of what that center back decides to do, the attacking team gains a massive, game-breaking advantage.
Let's move along and see how this builds historically. Because, as revolutionary as 2009 was, this concept wasn't just created out of thin air. The historical origins of a forward dropping deep stretch all the way back to the Corinthians in the 1890s. We also saw variations of it in South America with River Plate in the 1920s, the Austrian Wunder team in the 30s, and of course the great Hungarian national team in the 1950s. Fast forward a bit, and tactical visionaries like Johan Cruyff utilized Michael Laudrup in a very similar way at Barcelona in the 90s. But it was truly in 2009, with Pep Guardiola and a certain Argentine prodigy, that the role was absolutely perfected.
Which brings us to Section 3, Lionel Messi, the false nine revolutionary, the ultimate practitioner of this tactical disruption.
To play this role requires exceptional technical quality across the board.
And Messi's unique physical and technical traits, they made him the most lethal false nine in history. He had this impossibly low center of gravity that allowed for incredibly agile movement in heavily congested midfield spaces. When he dropped deep, he could flawlessly execute lightning-fast 1-2 passes with guys like Xavi and Iniesta. His elite vision meant he could thread these ridiculous cutting passes to wingers sprinting behind the defense. And crucially, if he ended up isolated, his unparalleled dribbling excellence meant he could just turn, drive directly at terrified center backs, and apply a clinical finish.
The historical peak of this specific system came during the 2011 UEFA Champions League final. Barcelona faced off against Manchester United and secured a dominant 3-1 victory. Messi constantly found open space in the midfield, and his deep drops actively pulled apart a legendary English defensive structure. After the match, one of the greatest managers of all time, Sir Alex Ferguson, simply conceded, quote, "Nobody's given us a hiding like that."
And the sheer statistical dominance of Messi in this role is honestly staggering. Operating as a false nine during the 2011-2012 season, Messi scored an unbelievable 73 goals. 73! That is the highest by any top-level player in Europe for a single year. Just think about that for a second. Being your team's primary elite playmaker and simultaneously scoring 73 goals. It was a feat that helped him secure 4 consecutive Ballon d'Or awards from 2009 to 2012. He completely redefined the forward position.
All right, Section 4, different types of false nines. Because believe it or not, you don't actually have to be Lionel Messi to play this role. Let's look at how other notable players adapted the false nine to fit their own unique strengths. Over in Italy, Francesco Totti was an early adopter at AS Roma under various coaches from 2006 to 2011. He used his sheer technical skills, striking ability, and constant movement to confuse defenders, proving the viability of the concept in a notoriously defensive league. Then you have Cesc Fàbregas. Spain used him as a false nine to win Euro 2012 under Vicente de Bosque. Because Fàbregas was naturally a midfielder, he was a true ball retention specialist. He couldn't necessarily dribble through a whole team like Messi, but his exceptional passing ability under pressure allowed Spain to dominate possession without ever fielding a traditional striker.
Now what's really interesting here is how the role evolved even further in the Premier League under Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool. Roberto Firmino played a vastly different version than Messi. Firmino was a counter-pressing specialist. His role was much less about dribbling directly at goal and almost entirely focused on aggressive defensive work, linking the midfield in attack, and creating space through incredibly demanding off-ball movement. This highly work ethic-dependent system is exactly what secured Liverpool the 2019 Champions League. And of course, we have to mention Thomas Müller at Bayern Munich. He plays a modern variant of the role he famously calls the Raumdeuter, which roughly translates to the interpreter of space. Müller is, by his own admission, a fairly average dribbler. Yet, he perfectly embodies false nine principles by immaculately reading the game, finding space intelligently, and constantly roaming between the lines to link play. He stays a bit more advanced than Messi did, but he's still a master of operating between the lines. Section 5. The modern tactical evolution. Let's bring this explainer right up to the present day.
Because this wasn't just a passing fad, you guys. It permanently altered how forwards are recruited and coached globally. While you might hear the rigid label false nine a little bit less today, elite, possession-dominant teams have embedded its exact principles into their modern DNA. Just look at Manchester City having a physical powerhouse like Erling Haaland intentionally drop deep in certain phases to link play. Or look at Liverpool using inverted wings with Diaz and Gakpo dropping in, or Barcelona maintaining their famous positional fluidity. The core concept, creating a central midfield overload through technical superiority, lives on incredibly strongly in today's game.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating thought to take away. We've seen how the false nine sparked a permanent shift from purely physical strikers relying on hold-up play to technical fluidity that demands 360-degree awareness. So, if the false nine proved once and for all that tactical intelligence and space creation can completely dismantle a rigid defense, will the traditional static number 9 ever truly dominate football again? Keep an eye out for that the next time you sit down to watch a match. Thanks for joining me on this one.